Jack was a successful entrepreneur, fast-paced, quick-thinking, and always acting on instinct. To him, everything was a goal to be achieved, even a weekend hunting trip with his son. But on a quiet morning deep in the Colorado wilderness, a single hasty decision changed the course of his entire life. And from that very moment, Jack learned a lesson no book, no success could ever teach him. Jack had always been the one in control. As the founder of a rapidly growing tech company in Denver, he was used to making snap decisions, analyzing situations in an instant, and winning with cold precision. At 35, Jack had everything most people dreamed of: a sleek modern home, a luxury car, a healthy bank account, and a network of investors ready to back any idea he pitched. But behind that glowing success was a truth even Jack rarely admitted: he barely spent any time with his family. His 10-year-old son, Eli, usually had dinner with his mom and was in bed before Jack even got home. The father-son interactions were limited to a few rushed minutes in the morning, or brief text messages like, "Sleep well, buddy," and "Dad's busy." Lately, Jack's wife had started showing signs of fatigue. She told him he needed to spend more time with their son, that Eli was growing up fast, and a child doesn't just need a roof over his head, but the heart of his father. That's when Jack came up with the idea: a weekend hunting trip with Eli. It would be a chance to bond with his son, and maybe, just maybe, an excuse to escape the endless stream of emails for a few days. To Jack, hunting wasn't just a hobby, it was one of the few places he felt completely in control: of nature, of his target, of time, of outcome. On Saturday morning, with dew still clinging to the pine needles and the forest birds just beginning to stir, Jack and Eli set out into the national forest near the mountains outside Aspen. Jack slung his bow and quiver over his shoulder, his eyes sharp and focused like he was heading into a meeting with major investors. Eli, beaming, carried a small backpack filled with a water bottle, sandwiches, and a sketchbook. "I'm gonna draw the first deer you shoot, Dad," Eli said, brimming with excitement. Jack smiled, though he wasn't sure this was the right time for drawing. Still, he said nothing. Eli was happy, and that was enough. They trekked deeper into the woods, their footsteps crunching over a carpet of dry leaves. Everything felt strangely peaceful. Too peaceful, so much so that Jack began to feel tense. He wasn't used to quiet. Then he spotted something moving in the distance, just beyond the trees. The hunter's instinct kicked in. His heart raced. He gripped his bow tighter, eyes narrowing as he locked onto the target, completely unaware that this morning would change him forever. Everything unfolded just as Jack was used to: a subtle rustle in the brush, a reflex honed by instinct. He raised his bow, drew an arrow, and released. The arrow shot through the air like lightning, hitting its mark with stunning precision. A young deer collapsed less than 40 feet away. "Wow, that was amazing, Dad," Eli said in awe from behind him. Jack turned to his son with a proud smile. In that moment, he felt something unfamiliar, not the usual thrill of a clean kill, but the warmth of being admired by his own son. It was a look Jack rarely saw from Eli. And though it lasted only seconds, it touched a part of his heart he hadn't realized he'd neglected. But the feeling didn't last. Instinct took over again. Jack noticed a doe standing nearby, trembling next to the fallen fawn. Her eyes were fixed on the two of them, not with fear, but something deeper. Pain. Jack didn't see it, or maybe he chose not to. All he thought was, one more arrow, and we're done. More meat. Bigger success. He turned to Eli. Step back a few feet, I need some room to shoot. Eli nodded and quietly moved away. Jack grabbed another arrow, drew the bowstring tight, and snap, the doe dropped beside her fawn, without a sound. The scene made Eli freeze. He looked into the doe's wide, glassy eyes, still full of emotion, and suddenly he didn't feel like drawing anymore. But Jack stayed alert. He heard a faint rustle in the bushes up ahead, quiet, but enough to stir his hunter's instinct once again. Maybe there's one more, he thought. 3 in one morning? Not bad. Without hesitation, he raised his bow, focusing hard on the vague silhouette behind the leaves. He didn't wait for a clear shot. He let the arrow fly. A breath of silence. Then a sound, not the crash of an animal falling, but a soft, human whimper. Deer don't make that kind of noise. Jack's heart seized. He dropped his bow and bolted toward the brush. A rising dread flooded his chest as he pushed through the branches, racing to where the arrow had landed. And then he saw Eli. His son was lying on his side, one arm clutching his stomach, his face pale as snow. Blood seeped through his moss-green jacket, and the arrow, horrifyingly accurate, was lodged deep beneath his ribcage. Jack froze. His mind spun, his heartbeat thundered in his ears. He dropped to his knees beside Eli, screaming his name in panic, in disbelief. The bonding trip had become a nightmare beyond imagination. And everything began to fall apart. Jack trembled as he cradled Eli's small body, his hands stained with the same blood that, just minutes earlier, had gripped a bow with confidence. Eli, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, he whispered, again and again, like a helpless mantra, but no words could erase the wound, or turn back time. Eli's eyes fluttered open, cloudy and dim. His lips moved, struggling to form words. Dad. I didn't think you'd shoot that fast, his voice came in shallow gasps. Jack, panicked, fumbled through his pockets for his phone. No signal. The dense forest that once felt like an escape now became a perfect, merciless trap, far from help, far from mercy. In that moment, sitting on the forest floor with his dying son in his arms, time seemed to stop. All the things Jack once believed were important deals, investors, profits, achievements, crumbled into meaninglessness. A sob clawed its way out of his throat, tearing through the pride he had carried like armor his whole life. And then, like a whisper from the universe, not words, but a deep, wrenching realization, something echoed inside him. Now you know. Now you know what it feels like. To be a parent losing their child. To feel helpless. Broken. Empty. How many living beings did you make feel this? without once pausing to imagine they might love too? Jack turned his gaze toward the two deer lying motionless just a few yards away. No longer trophies. No longer triumphs. Just quiet indictments of his blind cruelty. He remembered the mother deer's eyes, that look he dismissed. Now he understood exactly what it meant. Eli exhaled slowly. Jack leaned in, gripping his son's hand tighter. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You're gonna be okay, Eli, just hold on, buddy. But deep down, he knew. His son was slipping away. A low growl echoed from the forest's edge. Jack turned his head. A lynx stood there, silent and still, eyes sharp, not aggressive, not afraid. Just watching. Judging. And then, without a sound, it turned and disappeared into the trees. Jack looked back down at Eli, tears falling freely. For the first time in his life, he felt truly small. Not a CEO. Not a leader. Just a broken man, realizing too late that love and life are never things to take for granted. And in that blood-soaked embrace, deep in the quiet woods, Jack understood. He had killed the most precious thing in his life. Simply because he didn't stop and look closely enough. Eli died in Jack's arms before noon. No cell signal. No help. No second chances. Only the wind and the trees bore witness to the grief of a father who had lost his son by his own hand. Jack sat frozen for hours, no longer crying, no longer shouting. Just empty. His face had gone pale and hard, his blood-stained hand resting cold against Eli's chest, as if holding tight enough might somehow bring him back. But time has no mercy, not even for the successful. As the sun dipped behind the mountain ridges, Jack began to dig a small grave with his bare hands. He didn't dig out of duty, but as an act of penance. He laid Eli into the earth, covering him gently with the jacket he'd worn that very morning, still warm with laughter and life. And Jack whispered one last thing. I'm sorry, son. I should have slowed down, just enough to really see you. On the way back, Jack carried nothing. He left behind his bow, his backpack, his former self, the man who once believed he could control everything. He walked through the forest he once claimed to master, but this time, he felt infinitely small. Nature didn't need him. The world didn't revolve around him. And life was never meant to be conquered. The next day, Jack returned home with hollow eyes and a shattered soul. His wife collapsed when she saw him walk in alone. He said nothing. Just held her tightly, as if letting go might cause the whole world to fall apart again. In the weeks that followed, Jack didn't go back to the office. He no longer cared about meetings, investments, or profit margins. He began to write not code or business plans, but pages of raw reflection. About Eli. About that hunt. About a death that never should have happened. And about the way he had lived for years, blind to everything that truly mattered. One day, during a walk near a local wildlife preserve, Jack stumbled upon a group of children on a camping trip with their teacher. One of them asked, innocently, "Mister, have you ever been hunting?" Jack gave a sad, quiet smile and replied, "I have. But I've learned there are some things you should never hunt. Especially the ones that love you." From that day on, Jack volunteered with environmental education and wildlife conservation programs. He shared his story not to be forgiven, but to make sure others wouldn't have to learn the same lesson in the same brutal way. Jack could never bring Eli back, but he could live the rest of his life as someone who finally understood what life really meant. And from that deep, aching loss, Jack began to live, for the first time, as a whole human being. That winter, the snow came earlier than usual. Jack stood alone in the forest, now blanketed in white, near the place where everything had changed. He had returned not to escape the past, but to face it, truly face it, for the first time, with open eyes and an open heart. Beside a small stone marker etched with Eli's name, Jack gently placed a drawing. The paper had yellowed with time, but the pencil lines remained clear, a small deer standing next to a smiling boy. It was the first and only sketch Eli had managed to finish that fateful morning. Jack had found it in his son's backpack when he returned home. For months, he carried it everywhere, a fragile reminder that every life, human or animal, deserves to be cherished. Since Eli's death, Jack had become a completely different man. No longer the achievement-obsessed businessman, he had become a storyteller, sharing his journey in workshops, schools, on social media, and at community events. But he didn't speak to earn sympathy or admiration. He spoke to wake people up before they, too, had to learn the hard way what truly matters. All living things love their children, Jack often said during his talks. Just like I loved Eli. But for years, I didn't understand that. I shot a mother deer who watched her child die, and minutes later, I had to live through that very same pain in the most brutal way imaginable. Jack's story didn't just move people, it created real change. He partnered with wildlife protection organizations, helped develop emotional education programs for young people, and advocated for a deeper connection between humans, nature, families, and themselves. Each time he told his story, Jack still felt the emotion well up. But the pain was no longer a burden, it was a drive. He knew that Eli, though gone, lived on in every good choice Jack made. Every life saved, every heart stirred toward compassion, was an answer to the mistake he could never undo. And to anyone feeling lost, rushing through life, worn down or numb, Jack left this message. Life is a gift. Not because it's perfect, but because it's fragile. Don't wait until you lose the most important thing to realize that. Pause. Love. Slow down before it's too late. Jack was no longer a hunter. He had become a keeper of life, of memory, and of the deeper meaning of love. And from the ashes of loss, a new man was born.